Hi, I'm Ben from the Business Change team, and today we'll be talking about how to carry out stakeholder analysis. To do so, start by going onto the Business Change webpage and scrolling down and selecting Stakeholder Analysis. This will download the template. All you need to do once it's downloaded is to select the document and go onto the project summary. So the aim of carrying out this activity is to gain a greater understanding of how the changes are going to impact each stakeholder's sentiment, as well as the level of influence they may exert, so that you can define a strategy around how you will engage each of these groups. It makes sure they are supported, which allows you to build trust with your stakeholders and bring them into the change. For example, if an individual is significantly impacted and feels as though they aren't ready for the changes, they are unlikely to be supportive as street manager. The key focus here should be to think of ways to transition people from a blocker to a supporter. Now, these are naming conventions that we have used, but you are free to use different terminology if you wish. This exercise is sensitive because you are putting real individuals' names against how they are feeling, so please be careful to use the correct wording. As long as you have distinct groupings that allow you to tailor your approach, then that will work. We would advise that this analysis is carried out at the start of the project, as it will help your planning activities. It's important to also note that this should be treated as a live document, so you should keep it updated throughout the change just to ensure that you keep it up to date. More information can be found on the Guidance and Best Practice tab. For example, when you're talking about people and population size, ask yourself how many people are currently working on permit and noticing systems, and how many people will be using Street Manager. If we move on to the Stakeholder Analysis tab, we are greeted with this template. So how do you actually carry out a stakeholder analysis? Well, first off, you should be looking to break your stakeholders down into individuals to get a more granular idea of how the change will impact each individual in the organisation. This will give you a better view of what you can do to support them. The impact of the change and the individual's influence on it can be taken from the values L, M and H that you have input in the impact assessment and the readiness assessment. The most important thing to note in this video is that you should be documenting the individual sentiment towards the system as their readiness to change, as this is a good way to prioritise which stakeholders may be champions or may be blockers in this column here. The wording that we have used, for example, champion, this is someone who has high influence and is also a supporter of the change that you are carrying out. For an adopter, they've got a low influence but they are still a supporter. If you're an observer, they have a high or low influence, but they're neutral towards the change. If they're an opposer, they have low influence and they're resistant to the transition. And finally, when you've got a blocker, they're someone who has a high influence, but they're resistant. The next two columns give you the option to note down if each individual has been engaged with or if they need to be as a priority, so you know who to focus your efforts on. Then you can outline which channels you would like to use to ensure they are communicated with effectively. Finally, you've got a choice of 4 training interventions to decide on to further support your stakeholders. If you move on to the pivot table, what you can see here is for every time that we have outlined a stakeholder grouping here, the pivot table allows you to visualize each of these people. So for example, what we have here is if we change on the stakeholder analysis, if we feel that John Smith has gone from a blocker to an adopter, for example, if we go into the pivot table and right click and select refresh, the adopter has gone from 1 to 2. What we can do then is select the visualization dashboard, and what that will do is change the graph automatically from adopter 1 to adopter 2. That way you can very easily visualize who it is that you need to focus on and the number of people you have in each of the groupings. Thank you for listening, and keep an eye out for our next video on change strategy.